And, here we honor all paths to God. She's reading from A Course in Miracles. That's my spiritual backbone. But really, you can apply any name for God within that. You can do your own substitutions. When we talk about the word salvation, we're talking about peace. When I move in the thought system of love, I experience great peace. And I can't fail. So, today we're talking about making fresh baked bread for God. That's what we're talking about. And who doesn't love fresh baked bread? So a couple of years ago, somebody Jim McMahon does not like bread. He likes it once a week. So a couple of years ago, I was moving from being an actress, which was a 24/7 kind of job. And I did it from the time I was 18 to the time at that point I was around 40. And I knew myself. My identity was of this actress. And I also knew that that was no longer going to be my identity. And we're on the cusp of change. And I didn't know where to go, what to do, or what to say. So I started praying the prayer of Jabez, which is from the Bible, and it says, God, that you will bless me indeed and expand my consciousness, that your hand will be with me, and that you will keep me from fear, that I will not cause pain. If you want to tap into the use of that prayer, it's a spiritual practice that you can use, and it will transform your life as it did mine. And so what happened within a few weeks of using that prayer, I got a call from my sister, and she said, I want you to come down to Texas and do a motivational speech for 8,000 high school students and their teachers. And I was like, oh, no. I was ready to ask God for my greater good, but I was actually not ready to accept it. That was a whole other prayer I needed for that. So this is how we vacillate between stepping into, the next step and our resistance. A lot of times we deal with a lot of resistance. I said to my sister, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm barely a speaker. You should get my husband to do it. He's really funny. So immediately these resistances come up. She was baking fresh baked bread for me, and I was using yesterday's scraps and leftovers. I was only saying who I was from what I had known from the past. And so I needed to shift my consciousness so that I could move into the ability to use fresh ingredients and create a new outcome for my future. So I was used to hiding behind the scripts that people had handed me. That's what an actress does. I was okay using my words for your benefit, but for my own benefit or for the benefit of my God? So many no's involved with that. So when we reach that point where we are being called into a greater idea of ourselves, and we are constantly being called into a greater idea of ourselves, and we feel that fear, which you're talking about, like you feel that excitement and that fear, we got to decide to address that fear. And the way we can address that fear is by saying, I am not here by mistake. I am preordained for this moment. In fact, I was born for this moment. I've been preordained for it, and God has a plan that I can lean into. I can lean into my resolve with a higher power, and I can lean away from my resistance. But this takes practice. Life responds to mediocrity in the same way that it responds to high hopes. Life responds to them exactly the same. So we got to move forward with God. God always moves forward. God never steps backwards. God's not shy. God doesn't step backwards or, start to put things together with breadcrumbs. God is audacious. And if we want to move forward into our greater good, we got to get comfortable being audacious as well. So we need to be working with God if we want God to work for us. And in order to do that, we got to keep holy our high resolve of this is the truth. I am an author. And this is what it looks like in process. And I can claim that in my community and feel supported around that. So, there was a quote that I was given this week from my friend Bonnie. We do a spiritual practice every single morning. That's our practice. It's A Course in Miracles. And she sent me this quote that said, leftovers in their less visible form are called memories, stored in the refrigerator of the mind and the cupboard of the heart. And we will live on spiritual leftovers if we don't feel entitled for a greater good. That's why we'll live on leftovers. So there's a story in the Bible from David, and he says, when I became anointed, if you don't know the story of David in the Bible, he went from being a shepherd to being a king. I mean, can you imagine having to make that jump? He didn't make it all at once. First he was anointed. And they said, you are a king. You're an author. And then he was like, well, nothing's changed on the exterior, so I still look like a shepherd. I still look just like somebody who's not published, who's just writing, right? I'm using you as an example today. Yeah. So David lives within all of us. We have to move forward in our resolve despite what the form looks like. And, what he said, he said, because I have been anointed in thought, my cups will overflow. So I didn't think that when I was invited to speak in front of 8,000 high school students. I thought, because I have been anointed, I need to get the hell out of the building and run as fast as I can. God has not got my back. This was a big mistake. So all the time, that's a universal fear that we're not ready and we're not willing and we don't have what it takes. So when we say, I've been preordained for this moment, it can help to eradicate some of that fear. So when we think about leftovers, and those thoughts that get filled up in our refrigerators and our cupboards, some of those thoughts are romantic and nostalgic. And if we become too attached to those thoughts of yesterday and hold on to those breadcrumbs of yesterday, that these thoughts can actually plague our present moment and even impact our future greater good. So it's almost like we want to clear out the whole pantry and start fresh if we can, to not hold on to some of those old ideas. Now, some of us might have refrigerators stocked filled with old rotten ideas, And how long do we intend to hold on to those? They're called grudges, resentments, unforgivenesses. You might have them labeled and well stocked. Duplicates, just in case somebody might forget. Right. So, look, we have leftovers from last night. And leftovers are okay up to a point. Right? In fact, sometimes when we eat leftovers the next morning, they taste even better because we're like, oh my God, that was so good last night. It was so yummy. And then even maybe the third day, we're like, yeah, this was still really good. The fourth day, it's funky, right? We're not going to put funky food into our body. Why are we putting funky food into our minds and our spirits? Sometimes those leftovers are there because we have I don't have enough mentality. So it's even more important for us to feed our spirits and our minds with fresh ingredients and fresh baked bread. No one benefits from living off spiritual leftovers or a good enough mentality. There's no good that comes from our thinking that we are heir to breadcrumbs when we are actually heir to extraordinary abundance. That's who we are, and that's who our God is. So on Sunday morning, on this happy hour, we can give you a kickoff. You know what I mean? We can feed you something really nourishing, but if you don't go home and learn how to cook your own bread, you're going to starve during the week because this is not going to last you. It might last you till Tuesday, maybe, if I do a good job. So it's important to figure out how to bake that fresh baked bread for yourself. And it's just like when you go to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, you're constantly eating at restaurants and it's good food. But after a while, don't you crave your homemade food? And you're just like, I just want to go home and bake my own food. All of you are entitled to bake your own food. Your spirit's actually craving your homemade bread. You might be under the old idea, the old delusion that you need a priest or a minister or a rabbi or somebody to be that middleman to feed you the holy water and the sacred bread. But I'm telling you that is not the truth. And that thought actually puts me out of a job. But it is my job to tell you the truth. That's my job, is to tell you the truth. So everyone here is entitled to harvest some homegrown, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spiritual food. And spiritual food comes with no hangover. And you cannot overindulge in spiritual food. You cannot overindulge in it. In fact, you could supersize that. That's the one meal that you should and could supersize. So, and we're each responsible for our own spiritual high. There's an old paradigm that many of us are living under that comes maybe from a Catholic church or other philosophies that we might have come through, where literally when I came through the Catholic church, and I love my roots, don't get me wrong, I'm just talking about a specific ritual that was carried on there. When I was a child, I was not allowed to feed myself. I was not allowed to touch the Eucharist. I needed to come to the priest and stick my tongue out and be fed like a baby. If you create a society of people who do not understand how to feed themselves, you create a system that is enabling and is not an empowering. Here, we're empowering. Do you get the difference? And can I get an amen? Amen. All right. That worked out well. So, how do we get to a spiritual practice? You know, some people have a problem getting to a spiritual practice. It says like, you know, I had a problem getting to a spiritual practice because I didn't really have this focus that it took. And it's hard for us to show up for ourselves, right? So, so we end up feeling okay, surviving on these crumbs, and then also giving our God the leftovers. Like we do everything that we need to do on our priority list, and at the end, if we happen to have extra time, we slip in a spiritual practice. So we have to revert the process there. We have to rearrange the process. We have to reprioritize that our spiritual practice is the number one thing that we do. What does a spiritual practice look like? So for starters, the number one thing with a spiritual practice is consistency. That's going to be the difference between winning and losing at spiritual practice is consistency. So that's the number one. Do to something that you do every single day that helps bring you closer to your connection with the divine. Many forms can come in spiritual practices. It could be walking your dog can be a spiritual practice. If it's walking your dog, gardening, running, helping, volunteering, singing, painting, playing the piano, meditating, yoga, dance class, writing thank you notes can be your spiritual practice if you do it daily and you say, this is my spiritual practice. It doesn't matter the form that it takes. The form is not important. What is important is the effect. Does the effect relax you? That's number one. Does this activity relax me? Because if you're relaxing, that means you're actually getting still. This is based on the principle of be still and know God. So the number one thing it has to do is it has to bring you to a certain degree of stillness. The second thing is it has to bring you closer to God. Those are the two criteria of it. So under that umbrella, you could do whatever the hell you want that relaxes you and brings you closer to God. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't. Don't let anyone tell you that your spiritual practice has to look a certain way. Because only you can know the way that God is calling you. Okay? So, you want to use this practice to help you have a personal relationship with God and not rely on a secondhand account of your divine. You know, I mean, here at Speakeasy, we're, trying to inspire people to have upfront and personal conversations with each other. If we're not doing that with each other, we're sure as hell not doing that with our divine. So you want to start with your divine. Are you getting up close and personal with your divine? Are you getting front seats to the conversation with your God? Do you have a present tense God? Are you having a present tense experience with your God? We don't want someone else's leftovers when it comes to our experience with God. We want to have fresh, new thought with God. Now, we say, sometimes you might hear that new thought, that there is no new thought, that everything's just regurgitated. And that's a surefire way to keep us from having that present conversation. It's just regurgitated anyway, so I might as well just listen to you or check the stars or look at my horoscope. That's not true. So I was just on the cusp of currency right there. I stopped myself. So the truth is, there's so much uncharted territory. I mean, we don't know everything that lives in the ocean. We don't know everything that lives in the stars. You certainly don't know everything that happens in the terrain of your own being. If you go into the terrain of your own being, have you gotten to the bottom yet? Because I certainly haven't. And if my God is limitless, there's no way I'm going to get to that bottom. So there's no way I can be bored with the conversation of God. So this is exciting for us to take hold of the reins and decide I'm going to court my divine. There's no need anymore to try and take the leftovers and stretch them into some hobbled together meal. You're divine and you deserve some fresh baked bread. This practice that I'm trying to inspire you to take a little fire on is how you date your divine. If you treat your God well, you'll have wellness. If you treat your God like a best friend, you will have peace and prosperity. Why wouldn't you? Why would God withhold something like that from you? So practice makes perfect. And practice, the Latin word practice, means completed. That means whole. So we could say practice makes holy. Practice makes holy. And we get to tip into our holy selves. Wouldn't it be exciting to really walk the world as a holy being? I mean, doesn't the world deserve that version of yourself? If you have a practice, if you start to have a practice, which I know many of you already have, so I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we could always practice more, because practice makes perfect. So if you have a practice, it will be the thing that's maybe the most important thing about you. And once it becomes the most important thing about you, it will become the thing that you value. And you will begin to include it on your list to do, and it won't be on the bottom of the list. And you'll carve out time to ensure that you get to that practice. And you'll make sacrifices for that practice. And somebody will say, do you want to go for a hike with me at 8:45 in the morning? And you'll say, no, I got my practice. I'm meeting with my divine. This is not non-negotiable. This is what makes me a sane person in a crazy world. And I'm not going to take that off the list for anyone because I'm feeding my soul here. Some people say to me, Maureen, why do you do your practice every single day? Why do you get on that damn phone call every day? Aren't you tired already? It's been 5 years. You're still doing that damn phone call? Nobody says that. I'm just making that up. But sometimes people go, I can't believe you do it every single day. And what I say is, I can't believe I feed my body every single day. I feed my body food. I drink water every single day. Can you believe that? No one's ever asked me. I can't believe you eat every day. I can't believe you do that. I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience for a temporary time. You're claiming that as well. And if that's the truth, then how could we not be feeding our spiritual and our minds? How could we not be doing that? You know? So that's why it makes sense to me. It will help if you do your practice. It will bring you protection in your being. It will be the thing that helps you to ride over rough spots. It will help with clarity and discernment. In fact, I notice, and you might too, that it actually heightens your intuition. Why not have more intuition? You know, that never hurt anybody. It will help you to not take things too seriously during the grand shitstorms of life. That's always a good thing to have. It will improve your ability to prioritize. I mean, it will really improve your ability to prioritize. That's a beautiful skill. You can't learn that in a book. You got to practice it by going to the deep well of your divine. You will find yourself happier for no reason whatsoever. That's a beautiful thing for an outcome of having a spiritual practice. It will keep you in the hum and the present moment. It will, that hum and that yummy experience of enjoying fresh baked bread with your divine. It's actually a really beautiful thing. And the past will fall away, and the future will fall away, and your pantries will be absolutely empty, and it won't matter because you'll be living off the manna of God, and you'll be satiated and satisfied by it. So I'm asking you this week and maybe for the next 2 weeks to really kick up your level, your idea, your commitment to your own spiritual practice. Like, what does that look like? To commit to making some fresh bread with God, to find and delight in a sincere practice that's done every day, that relaxes and restores and reconnects you with the present moment so you can have a present tense experience with God. One of the very first spiritual books I ever read was given to me by my first sponsor in the 12 Step, and it was a book from Augmentino. And the reason I love this quote is because it helps to bring us that little shepherd that we sometimes feel identified with into our kingdom. You know, this little tool, you know, it had so many great tools in the book, but this one could help you move from that little shepherd into the kingdom. And this little piece, he says, I will persist until I succeed. I will take another step. And if that is of no avail, I will take another and yet another. In truth, one step at a time is not too difficult. I know that small attempts repeated will complete my undertaking. And I am on the way to fulfilling the prophecy of my God's kingdom. And that's the word.